Hey, this is Chandra with Piano at a Glance, and welcome to part 2 of my series on intervals. In this lesson, I'll be going over the difference between a melodic and a harmonic interval, and I'll also teach you how to name your intervals. If you're new to music or piano, feel free to check out part 1 of this video. I've put a link down in the description below. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we get started naming intervals, I briefly want to go over the difference between a harmonic interval and a melodic interval. So in this first example here, we have two different chords, and you notice how the notes are stacked on top of each other. So those notes are played together, C and E, C and G, and those are what we call harmonic intervals. And if we go to the next example here, we have from C to G. Those are separated. Okay, it could be any note from C to E, C to F. Anytime they're separated like that, those are called melodic intervals. Okay, so next we're going to go down and take a look at a C major scale. So anytime we're dealing with intervals, we always want to think in terms of any major scale. So I'm just going to take C major, for instance, and talk about two different ways that we name intervals. So the first way is quantity, meaning the distance between the root note to the next note, or the root note to the third, fourth, and so on. Okay, so from C to D, we're just going to count. 1, 2. So from C to D is a second. Okay, so from C to E, we count 1 from C, 2, 3. That gives us a third. Okay, and this process keeps going all the way until you get to the last C. Okay, so if I go and fill these in, this one's a fourth from C to F, a fifth from C to G, sixth, seventh, and when we get to the last note, there is a space of 8 keys in between. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? So that is called an octave. So now that we've gone over quantity, which is, again, the space between two notes, now we want to look at quality. Is it a major? Is it a minor interval? Is it perfect, diminished, or augmented? That's what we want to do here. So if we go down, we'll go to a cleaner look here. So the perfect intervals in a major scale are going to be the first note in the scale, the fourth note from C to F, fifth note from C to G, and the octave from C to C. Okay? So in any major scale, the perfect intervals are always going to be your first or your root note of the scale, your fourth, fifth, and octave. Okay? So we still want to keep the numbers the same. So the first one, it's all by itself, but let's say we'll go back up here to do this first one. So let's say that we'll say that this note will change it into a C also. So if that's the case, right here, this is called a perfect unison because it's the same note, same pitch. Okay? So I just have it marked as P just for the single note, okay? So we have a perfect, let me write that in, perfect unison. Okay? So we'll go to the next perfect interval, and we're going to keep the numbers the same. We said from C to F is a fourth. So it's going to be called a perfect fourth, or P4. And what about the next one, from C to G? Well, we said up here that it's a fifth distance away, so it's going to be a perfect fifth. And then the last one we said was an octave, and we said that there was a gap of 8 in between. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You could say perfect octave P8, or like we did at the top, just label it octave. Okay? So once you've established the perfect intervals, now you want to establish what the major intervals are. So the major intervals are going to be labeled as M. So we'll take this first example. Major, we said this was a second from, if I move this back, from C to D, we said was a second. Okay, and so if we go back down here, we'll label it capital M with the number 2. So the next interval we said was a third. So if we go, we put an M here, it's going to be a major third. Over here, we said from C to A is a sixth, so major 6. And the last one we said from C to B was a seventh, so we have major 7th. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how we find minor intervals. So in order to get a minor interval, you're only dealing with the major intervals. Okay? So I'm taking from C to D this first example, and we're just going to take a look right here. Originally it was just C to D, but in order to get a minor interval, it would be from you want to flat the note, so from C to D flat, you're lowering the top note by a half step. So in this case, these are minors. It would be a little m and a 2. So that's your minor second. How about the next one? From C to E flat. So originally it was from C to E, that's major. In order to flat that, we want to drop the E down a half step, so that would give us from C to E flat. So that's a minor third. Okay, so we'll look at the major 6th from C to A, and we'll take a look at this example here. And this example, we want to flat that. So we've got from C to A major, we're going to flat the A to make it minor. So that is a minor 6th. And the last one, if we know from C to B is major. So this example down here, from C to B is major. I'm going to flat the B flat. I'm going to flat the B. Okay, so we said originally major seventh was from C to B. Now we have flatted the top note. We brought it down a half step. So now it's going to be from C to B flat. Now let's talk about how to create a diminished chord. So earlier we said that if you take a major interval, or I'm sorry, I want to use this one. If you take a major interval and we drop the top note down a half step, that gives us a minor interval. So we took from C to E and we lowered the E to an E flat, so that gave us a minor third. Now in order to get a diminished chord, we want to drop the top note again by another half step. So this would create a double flat. Okay? So that's what happens when we take a major interval and turn it into a diminished. There's an extra step. So you go from the major, you flat the top note to give you the minor third, and then you want to take this note and flat it again. Okay? Now, when it comes to the perfect intervals and naming them diminished, we'll go ahead and take this example, the perfect fifth. This is a little easier. All we're going to do is flat the top note. And now you have a diminished fifth. Okay? This right here would be, or this here would be a diminished third. The last one I want to go over is how to create an augmented interval. Now, you can make a major interval and a perfect interval augmented using the same rule. So this one's going to be pretty simple. So let's go ahead and take a look at the major third, C to E. In order to augment it or make it bigger, I want to raise the top note by a half step. So instead of an E, I'm going to get an E sharp. So here's the major third. Okay? If I augment it, I raise the E to a half step up, it takes us to C and F. But remember, we said earlier in the video that C to F was a perfect fourth. So anytime you're dealing with these augmented intervals, you always want to stick to the letter name. Okay? So in this case, you want to stick to E sharp. So so C to E sharp is an augmented third. Okay? Now, if we go over to, let's try a perfect interval. So we have a perfect interval of a fifth, and all we're going to do, pretty simple, is we're just going to raise that G to a G sharp. So this was the original from C to G, and now we're going to make it bigger, augment it, so raise the G to a G sharp. Okay? And that would give you an augmented fifth. Well, that wraps up today's lesson. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. And if you found this video helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.